The Falcons' D-line needs to establish an identity, but is there such a thing as having too deep a rotation?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. These sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So if you don't know me, I'm your very humble podcast host, Aaron Freeman. Been covering the Falcons for a long time, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP. You all may also know me as Mr. Drew, Mr. Sirius Black, and Mr. AKA. And of course, I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this podcast that appreciates the humility of hating that comes on this daily podcast. All you have to do to become an everydayer, subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today I am, of course, joined by none other than Jarvis Davis as we wrap up the week here on Locked On Falcons. Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And today we're going to talk about Jarvis's favorite subject, which is trench play. We saw the Falcons put their pads on this week. We saw the defense seemingly make strides, sort of closing the gap after a very, very strong start for the offense in the early days of training camp. But now once the pads go on and, you can start putting hands on guys, in practice now, all of a sudden the defense seemed to, take advantage of those opportunities. But Jarvis, before we get into sort of what we saw this week in practice, I'm just curious to pick your brain on what your expectations for the defense are this season. I've expressed sort of my skepticism on whether or not this defense is going to be a strength of this roster like we saw it last year. B, I think, when we're talking about stacking it up, I think the offense is going to be the driving force in this upcoming season. But I think the goal of the defense is just to be good enough to not lose them games if the offense is clicking on all cylinders. But I'm just curious, where do you sort of fall on that? Do you expect this defense to build on what they were able to do last year? Do you expect them to take a step back? Where are you at with this Falcons defense at this point heading into the season?
To be honest with you, I want to be able to establish identity to make the offense one-dimensional. What I mean by that is just on a weekly basis, I know that, hey, we're going to stop the run. We're going to be able to stop teams from running regardless of who we're playing, because I feel like there's so many questions as far as who's going to be those few guys, a handful of guys that Jimmy Lake can throw out there to go rush the passer. You until that gets figured out, like I think they're going to kind of figure that out on the fly as the season goes along. Obviously, I have a couple of guys, and I know you have a couple of guys that you feel may be able to do that, but we just can't pinpoint one or two guys that coming off the edge and saying, hey, man, these are going to be the guys to kind of get the job done. But until that happens, I feel like they have to be strong against the run game. They have to establish the identity to say, hey, we're going to stop the run, regardless of what y'all want to do, and be able to dictate to the offense, like, you're going to have to pass it. Now, granted, a lot of offenses out there want to throw the rock 35, 40 times, but when you get to offense to be one-dimensional, there are so many things that you can do when you know that they can't do one or the other, right? So if you're establishing yourself, and I know that they can do it because they have Grady Jarrett, they have Dave Onyemata, they have Taquan Graham in that base 3 defensive lineman set. So when you have those type of guys, and all those guys right there that I just mentioned, those guys are really strong against the run, especially, Grady Jarrett and Taquan Graham when he's healthy. That was one of the things that I know you and I both agree. I know that doesn't happen a lot, but we can both agree that, Taquan Graham's strength is in that run game. So when you see the guys like that in there, and throw in James Smith-Williams as well, what he can do, I feel like technically he's really sound when it comes to, being a force on that edge and really squeezing that tight end down in order to get that back to bounce outside, and he can go out and make it tackle. So I feel like if the Falcons can dictate to the offense that, hey, you're going to have to beat us throwing the ball, regardless of what that offense is trying to do, I feel like they're being a really good space to kind of work their way to getting to, all right, here's our guys that are going to be able to rush the passer on 3rd and long.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I think, let's get into it. One of the things I've talked about on this pod is when you looked at sort of how Ryan Nielsen ran the defense last year, he believed in having that deep rotation so that guys could be fresh. That was something that he believed in New Orleans. That's something that he followed in Atlanta with like 9 guys playing, rotating in and out of lineup throughout these games last year. And one of the things I noted with Raheem Morris in LA the last couple of years, they didn't have as deep a rotation. And I'm just curious, do you think that's because they just kind of had their guys and they knew, whether it was a Leonard Floyd, whether it was Von Miller, Aaron Donald, some of those other guys, they just had the high end talent that allowed them to just basically, we need to get our best 4 guys or whatever out on the field as much as possible. And we don't need to necessarily, have that sort of deep rotation with them. I'm just curious, do you feel like with the Falcons right now, and it does feel like so far in the early going of training camp, they are leaning more towards that deeper rotation, but is that just part of the process of figuring out who are their guys? Where do you kind of stand on sort of the depth of this Falcons rotation up front at this point?
I think it was the emphasis put on having depth and being able to get those rotation of guys, just given the situation, because David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, those guys are 30 plus, so they can't be out there playing multiple games, especially when Grady coming off of an injury, right? So you want to be able to ease them into those situations as far as from a amount of rep standpoint. And in order to be able to do that, you got to have guys who are capable, right? That's why you saw the emphasis in this particular draft on interior defensive linemen, guys who can play inside and outside, because you can play around with matchups. And like we even seen, so far out in training camp, you've seen Arnold Ebiketie and Braylon Trice kind of matched up when they're coming in on third downs, when they're coming out there in the nickel. So you're trying to mix and match guys, see who plays well together, see who can be able to be one of those guys that you can rotate in and help supplement some of those reps from your older guys, so those guys can be at max potential once and know that once they're out there, they can go full bore. Because there are some situations, things can be a little different when you know that you aren't going to have to play the entire game or 85-95% of the snaps on any given Sunday. So when I feel like that, Terry Fonda and Raheem Morris said, you know what, we don't top end of these edge rushers or guys that are at the top of the draft, but we do like multiple guys in the mid rounds that we feel like we can snatch up, so we can pair those guys with the veterans that we already have and work on having that rotation and let those guys just fight it out, to be honest with you, because that's what it looks like. You talking about like adding Laquelle London and Kentavious Street, who showed well, before he got injured. And, all of those guys are kind of forgotten about because you talking about all the rookies. It's just this defensive line could be so deep, man. And I'll be interested. It's been cool to watch to see how these guys kind of, as they get closer to, cut time, like who's going to be out there on the street. And I feel like it's going to be somebody that's pretty doggone solid, because those guys been getting after it ever since they put the pads on.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I want to talk a little bit more about some of the specific players as we sort of stack this rotation, as well as whether or not having a rotation at the edge rusher position makes a ton of sense. And we'll get into that here with Jarvis Davis as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Passion, drive, patience. It is the formula for winning championships, and it's also what's going to keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, seatbelt covers, all to maintain and level up your vehicle to peak performance. Whether you're into power, style, or speed, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find what exactly you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, baby. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car an MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guarantee fit only available to U.S. customers. So I'm here with Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta. We're talking about the Falcons D-line group. I think you're right, Jarvis, where when you talk about Grady Jarrett, you talk about David Onyemata, those guys being 31 plus at this stage in their career, coming off seasons where they had some nicks, some injuries. Obviously, Grady Jarrett missing half of the season. That last month of the season, David Onyemata dealing with some knee issues due to that MetLife turf sort of getting him up there. And so I think it's definitely a positive for this team to be as deep as possible in terms of their D-line room so that you can allow those two guys to be fresh. Because when we're talking about this D-line rotation, it's like whether we're talking 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 players deep, we know two guys that are going to be part of that rotation and where they fit in that rotation at the top of the batting order, basically, with David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett. But I guess my question to you is, do you feel like having a deep rotation at the edge rusher room is as valuable as it is at the D-line room? Just because, do you just kind of want two guys to kind of emerge and just be the guys? Because that's what you saw in LA last year, where like Byron Young and Michael Hoyt never left the field for the Rams pretty much last year. They were by far their two best players. Obviously, that was a position that the Rams wanted to try to upgrade this year. Obviously, bringing in a guy like Jared Verse, and I'm sure it's probably some other player that I'm forgetting about. But I'm wondering, is having that rotation at edge as valuable as it is on the interior?
Personally, I would have to probably say no, because here's the thing. Just given the situation that the Falcons in from that edge spot, and I'm talking about Arnold Ebiketie specifically, he don't need to be rotating with anybody, because like I've talked about it on this pod and on the Atlanta Football Party Falcons edition. The man is making steps right now. We can be having a conversation about whether or not he should have been making those steps a little bit faster. That's up for discussion. But the man has progressed, and when you see, having 6 sacks last year, and you see all opportunities where he actually won up front, but he wasn't able to finish and get home. When you combine those two things, and when you talk about having that veteran in Jesse Bates on the back end, AJ Terrell, Mike Hughes, and Clark Phillips, those guys kind of battling out for that outside spot. So, and D Alford in the nickel as well, and Clark Phillips kind of cross training. So you got some guys that are battling out for some positions on the back end. So you assume that those guys are going to be better, in year two being together. And then that going to open up things for your guys like Arnold Ebiketie to come off the edge. And I really feel like he needs to get as many opportunities to rush the passer as possible. I don't have an issue with James Smith-Williams being in that base, being that first guy in that, because we talked about that as far as being the run game, that's being his strength. I don't mind playing guys in their strength. Arnold Ebiketie's strength is to come off the edge. So I don't need him rotating. Like, if you're going to take somebody out, take out Lorenzo Carter. If you want to put him in on third and long in that spot. And like Braden Trice, I mentioned it earlier about Braden Trice being out there paired up opposite of Arnold Ebiketie. So I'm cool with getting that situation figured out. But as far as Arnold Ebiketie goes, 17 needs to be in there every opportunity when that quarterback is probably going to drop back to throw the football.
Yeah, to me, it kind of feels like the saying when people say when you have two quarterbacks, that means you have none quarterbacks. And yeah. I feel like it's kind of the situation with the Falcons and where they're at with their edge rush room, where it's like, yeah, they have 4 edge rushers, which kind of means they don't really have one guy that's out there making plays consistently, where you feel like you don't want to pull him off the field, and especially at that position where you have two sort of young up and coming guys like Braylon Trice and Arnold Ebiketie. You want to see those guys kind of emerge this year. So we'll see if they do that, over the course of the summer and obviously over the course of the season. But when we talk about some of the pieces in this rotation, whether we're talking about the edge room, whether we're talking about the D-line room, I know you've been to a couple of practices now. You've mentioned before, some plays that you've seen guys like Braylon Trice and Arnold Ebiketie. Is there anybody on the interior D-line that has sort of stood out to you when you've been at practices? Anybody that when you go to future practices, you'll be, keying on to sort of see where they sort of fit into this rotation?
A guy that has popped to me has been Eddie Goldman. when you been out of the game for 2 years and kind of signing with the team and kind of wavering, oh, I don't think I'm into it. I don't think I got it anymore. And then you come back with a new regime under the new regime, and they say, oh, you want to see what's going on? You got some familiarity with this team and everything like that. You coach. You've played up under Jay Rodgers, who's defensive line coach. So there's some familiarity there. So when you talk about the situation, the scenario, it can be a little different. So it's different this year. So I just want to know where his mindset is, and for him to come out here and kind of shine like he did early on, because man, 2 years out of playing ball, I can't even wrap my head around that. And coming back into the NFL, like, it was hard in college because I've been hurt before. I had to be out for 2 or 3 months at a time, and then try to come back in mid-season. That junk is hard, dude. You talking about rehab, rehabilitation, but not to be hurt, but just saying, hey, I don't know if I have it anymore, or I don't know if I can still play this game and then come back. But yeah, he's the guy early on that I kind of have got my eyes on. And I feel like, man, this dude still looks like he still got it. So hopefully that's something that he can build on, and he can be on the team once they get started, and not necessarily say, hey, man, I don't know if I got it. I don't think I got it anymore. I'm going to go ahead and buy my big. But hopefully he's the guy that continues to progress and kind of beat that notion that, hey, man, I know I've been out 2 years, but hey, it's a reason why I was drafted high, into the NFL coming out of Florida State. But another guy that I really want to have my eyes on, and I'm going to be locked in a little bit more, pun intended, is Ruka Rororo. I want to see him pop. I want to see him kind of get some good work in with the ones, and going against guys like Chris Lindstrom and, or Matthew Bergeron and all that stuff. So those are some of the guys that he's one of the guys that I'm having my eye on. Also, man, I don't know if you heard, but man, somebody tried Matthew Bergeron out there at practice one, after the 11-11. I think it was the linebackers right after play. 52, I think it's Eifler. I think his last name is Eifler. Eifler kind of walked up to, behind Matthew Bergeron and kind of mushed him upside the head. I thought he was kind of like patting him on the back, like, hey, like good rep or whatever. But nah, man, Matthew Bergeron turned around. He came over the top with his joint, bop, right upside his head. I just saw Eifler was just kind of bagging up a little bit. Like, they were like, hey, man, y'all chill out. I was like, shoot, you ain't got to tell Eifler to chill out. He knew it. So he was like, yeah, I don't want no smoke, big man. That's how you had to kind of take a look at it. But to see Bergeron, like, really just, being one of those dudes, like, Chris Lindstrom is an excellent guard, but he's kind of like a nice guy,
Mhm.
but, that demeanor. But to be able to see Bergeron, not freshman year, when in his rookie year, be one of those guys that obviously has some struggles. You're going to have that when you play in a new position in NFL specifically, but to kind of see him come into that and just understand, like, man, I'm about to be mean and nasty, and I'm about to show y'all. And for him to say, you know what, dude, don't try me like that no more. And I think dude heard the message loud and clear.
I think it's funny, Jarvis, because I remember you saying the other day on another show that we were on, talking about David Onyemata being Canadian, right, and being a nice guy, but then he flips the switch. And
Right.
Bergeron kind of has that too, like Canadian guy.
Yeah,
and everybody
man.
knows Canadians, not to be stereotypical or whatever,
No,
but
no,
they have a reputation of being nice people, right? Very
right.
friendly, all that sort of things. But like you get that Canadian that I've seen some Canadians play hockey. That, like, they're when you get those guys on the ice and you get some of these guys on the football field like Bergeron and Onyemata, that switch flips, and all of a sudden they become very un-Canadian when he
Yeah.
gets out there on the field.
Man, that man arm looked so long when he came over the top. I was just like, what in the world? I was like, oh, he must didn't know who that was. Man, that man came over the top. He was like, hey, man, what's wrong with you? I was like, ooh, yeah, I like that, And D-Led was out there trying to, all right, who you think won the fight? I was like, sir, that was not a fight. That was a skirmish. But yeah, it's cool to see those guys out there, offensive linemen for this squad, not taking no junk, man. I love to see that type of stuff, man, because that's what it's all about. Like, hey, man, you're not about to mess with me. And matter of fact, don't mess with me, or you're going to get more of this. I love that type of stuff.
Yeah, I got you. So, We are, creeping up on preseason games, right? The Falcons won't get their first preseason action until next week, but there is some preseason action tonight between the Chicago Bears and Houston Texans, Hall of Fame game. And, I want to pick Jarvis's brain if, he's going to be checking that out, see if anybody he's going to have his eye on in tonight's action, as well as, some players that he is hoping that when we get to the Falcons preseason action next week against the Miami Dolphins, he's going to have his eye on to see if those guys pop, in addition to all the players that we've already talked about on today's episode. Right, summertime is a time where the sports aren't always sporting like we want them to, but we're getting towards a point in summer where the sports are starting to sport like we want them. We got the Olympics, we got baseball, NFL preseason coming up, NBA season's right around the corner, NHL, all that and more. And FanDuel is here to help you out. They're keeping the party going because they're hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Whether you want to bet on tonight's Hall of Fame game action, where the Houston Texans are 1.5-point favorites, or you want to bet on next week's action, where the Falcons are 1.5-point favorites against the Miami Dolphins, FanDuel has got you covered. And head on over to FanDuel.com. Make the most out of your summer. FanDuel is official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Well, wrapping up here with Jarvis Davis of Locked On Falcons. One player we won't be seeing in tonight's preseason action, it's already been confirmed, Caleb Williams. We won't be seeing Jonathan Owens either. He's over in Paris hanging out with the wife, Simone Biles. Now he's with the Chicago Bears. I don't think we're going to see CJ Stroud. So tonight's Hall of Fame game between the Houston Texans, Chicago Bears, is going to be a lot of third stringers. Jarvis, I don't know. Are you just going to tune in just so you can wet your whistle to get football back, or are you going to be glued to the screen for that action?
1000%. I'm in, man. Like, sign me up. I love like the first preseason game. Obviously, like you said, they're not gonna be as many names. I'll be interested to see some of the rookies get some run and get some burn out there. Specifically Rome Odunze. I'm just like, oh man, are they gonna play him? Are they not? And the coach said, Eberflus said they're not gonna play the starters, right? Okay, all right. Rome Odunze, you got Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. He's not a starter, technically. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's see the dude from UW, see if he can go out there and let's see some of that explosion that we saw at UW, transfer into the league. But if he doesn't, it doesn't matter to me, because like, this is the first official preseason game of the season. I always love it. I was like, man, it seemed like they just started practice and they already getting ready to start playing games, man. I always think it's a cool thing just to see. And then you got the Hall of Fame ceremony, the Orlando Ledbetters getting honored. It's just, all this stuff is just super, super cool, man. It just lets you know football right around the corner, man.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly, I'll probably check over the depth chart before the night's game and be like, oh, this 4th round pick that I had my eye on potentially. Let me see what that guy does out there on the field. So we'll see on that front. But, looking specifically to the Falcons game next week against Miami, I think we can probably guess that the Falcons aren't going to probably play too many of their starters, at least the established ones, which is probably everybody on offense. And then maybe a couple of guys on the, maybe we see Mike Hughes and guys like that, and Richie Grant or whatever, just because they're in, I guess, battles for their starting job. Although I guess it would probably say a lot, right? If those guys sit, would you agree with that, Jarvis? If some of these guys that we're expecting to be competing for starting jobs are sitting for that first preseason game, would that kind of tell you that they might have that spot locked up?
Oh yeah, definitely. If you don't see a guy like Clark Phillips play, it's like, what? Because we know what, he's, like you said, we mentioned earlier, he's been cross-trained at nickel and the outside corner. If you don't see him play, and Mike Hughes, we don't see him play, I was like, okay, that would be very interesting, because that's why I feel like mostly we'll probably see Phillips play, because he's a second-year player, and and he's kind of still figuring out what we want to do with him, because we're running them at 2 different spots. So, and you got veteran guys in those spots, and D. Alford and Mike Hughes. So I would feel like a guy like, if Mike Hughes doesn't play, I'll kind of understand that a little bit more if I don't see Clark Phillips play, because I feel like Clark Phillips is, when those guys come in at corner, man, and especially the questions that we have, like you said, we love him. You just shout. If I can use an Atlanta, way of pronouncing that word, but I think overall, though, I feel like guys like Brandon Dorlus, Zion Lowe, those are going to be some of the guys that, I'd be interested to see, just from getting reps like JD Bertrand. Those are going to be some guys I'd be like, okay, this is Jace McClellan, like those guys in the lower rounds. Those are going to be the guys that are going to benefit from getting as many reps as possible, and specifically in these games. And are we going to see Michael Penix?
I was going to bring him up after. It's like we're bearing the lead here. The one player that we all want to see is Michael Penix.
Yeah, we're gonna see MPX, man. Like, let's go.
So our Gertori can be like, there is no quarterback controversy. I'm like, I don't know. He completed 16 passes against the Dolphins third stringers. Maybe we should start.
Look, let him drop a doggone 40 or 50 to like Rondale Moore or something, man. Oh my God, I can't wait. That's what I'm really looking forward to. That one moment where my MPX drops back to pass, doggone the offensive line holds up solid. He slang that bad boy down the field, man, and you see that left-handed rotation of the football just drop right into the bread basket of Rondale Moore, and you sitting up there. He takes it in for the touchdown. Next thing you know, there's a quarterback controversy in Atlanta right now. Kirk is not going to be ready because he's not playing in any preseason games, and Michael Penix is the future of this team. So let's start it right now. I'm just like, all right, man, here we go. Let's go. If y'all want to go there, all right, cool. Let me. I'm gonna sit back and get my popcorn ready and just enjoy the ride, baby. I ain't trying to argue against nobody when it comes to that type of stuff.
As someone who produces daily content, about the Atlanta Falcons, like, I'm not going to be upset at all if I can get like.
I already know what your thumbnail going to be on Monday.
Yeah, 2 or 3 episodes, that following week, just talking about, hey, did you see? Let's just break down Michael Penix's first quarter, and then tomorrow we'll break down his second quarter, and we'll just go through. I don't know. That's just me.
You gotta go through those progressions, baby.
So I'm not going to be upset about it. So that is obviously going to be the player that I think all of us have our eyes on. I guess I should ask
this. Check this out, though. What if Braden Trice get 2 sacks in one game?
It'd be nice to see. It'd be nice to see.
See, look, I can see the disdain going across your forehead right now. You got a wrinkle that just can't popped up right there. Like, bro, where the wrinkle come from, dude? Like, come on, man. Follow me here.
Aaron hates Braylon Trice narrative has come from, Jarvis. I feel like you just made this up out of the blue. You just woke up one day. You know what?
Maybe
Aaron doesn't like Braylon Trice. I'm like, I like Braylon Trice. I think he's a pressure guy. That's all it is. And I'm just like, I'm tired of the Falcons having pressure guy. It's not Braylon Trice issue. It's just like, all right, like, We've seen this song and dance before. It's like, and then we were sitting there going like, why is he getting sacks? And I'm just like, because he's a pressure guy. But it's fine. It's fine. Hey, look, as I always say when it comes any conversation we have about the Falcons pass rush, beggars cannot be choosers. So if Braylon Trice is going to be out there getting 40 pressures and only 3 sacks or whatever the numbers wind up being, hey, I ain't going to complain about it because look, it's 40 more pressures than a lot of other guys on the team.
A lot of other guys.
I'll take it.
We might need to do an episode of, or at least one segment of guys that the Falcons have drafted to rush the passer, and they turned out to not live up to that billing. I don't know. A couple of names that
feels too depressing.
Like Dansley Mapanga.
I don't think that's. You said a segment. I think that's like 3 episodes. Not to depress anybody, but it's basically been 25 years since the Falcons drafted and developed the guy. That was Patrick Kearney.
Man, that seemed like such a long time ago.
And so a lot of people listening to this podcast right now that weren't alive when the Falcons drafted Patrick Kearney.
Ooh, that's yeah. I'm getting depressed.
What were you doing 25 years ago, Jarvis?
Ooh, wow. 25 years ago, I was in high school, dude. I was still in high school.
So was I. I was trying to get my driver's license. I was like worried about getting my driver's license.
God, that's a long time ago. Oh, that's such a long time ago.
I had hair.
I remember when Walter Jones took Patrick Kearney's soul one day.
went up like this. I had a little fro back then. I had hair back
You got
then.
a fro? Wait a minute, bro. You got a picture?
I got
Not
one.
now.
I'm not going to show
Obviously.
it to you, but I got one somewhere.
I need picture. I need proof, sir.
Yeah.
Afro? Wow.
Yeah.
Man. Did you have the cornrows too?
I did.
Oh,
Yeah,
the corn. You rocking the corn. You was thugging it back in the day, huh?
You know, it was the 90s, baby. You know what I'm saying?
I love that. It's the 90s, baby.
You know? Out here
Yeah,
trying
man. Yeah.
to be Andre 3000. You know how.
Yeah, man. Who was it trying to be under 3 stacks?
Yeah.
You know how the other people looked at him? Oh man, can get a quarter of that attention? Yeah.
I just
Thank you.
need 1%, baby. That's all I need.
Right. That 1% would have been lovely. What you mean? Shoot.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know who we're talking about or what we're talking about, I apologize, but for those who do, I know how we feel.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Well, on that note, Jarvis, I think that's enough to wrap up today's episode. We'll be back tomorrow with a Falcons historian shootout on Julio Jones. So, taking it deep. And that will be the last semifinal. And the winner of that will be going on to the championship to face Corey Woodruff and talking all about Matt Ryan. That will probably be a couple of weeks from now as we get deeper into the summer. But you can tune into that. That'll be a special Friday, Saturday episode here on Locked On Falcons. You're getting that premium content, that extra free content, free and available on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you check out Jarvis Davis over at Locked On Sports Atlanta. I think we'll be doing something after the Falcons Friday night practice as well, Jarvis, if that's not the case. So check us out then as well tomorrow night for that. And that's going to do it for us, guys. And if you want to sort of catch all the attention from around the league and sort of who's standing out in various training camps, Locked On Sports or Locked On Podcast. What is it called? Locked On NFL Scouting. I just went through every permutation of Locked On. Like,
all those guys.
Too many things called Locked On something. Locked On what is it called? Locked On NFL Scouting with the draft dudes, Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs, giving you the lowdown on some of the key position battles, team building, all that stuff and more. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every